Right, in this lesson we're going to be talking about money, or as they like to say, revenue. That is, how do you get money in? What are people going to pay for? As always, we've got a number of questions that we start off with, and I'll run through those now. So what value will customers pay for? What will they demand for free? What will they actually pay for? And this is really at the core of your business. If you create something that's great but people won't pay for it, you've got a big problem. If you've got something that's pretty good that they're going to pay for, awesome. I was talking to somebody the other day, and he said, well, when they started off, what they did is they sent out a review system, and all the customers were saying, I'm getting great value, I'm getting great value, I'm getting great value. So then what he did is he just gently increased the price until people were just starting to say, yeah, the value is really good, a little bit, but it's getting to be a bit expensive. And there he was able to find the right price point for his product. And so this is a really good example for the value that people will pay for. And so you also have to ask, what are customers or segments paying for at the moment? If you've got a brand new startup business, you may not be able to answer this, but it's a great excuse to go out and start looking at your competitors and see what customers are paying for at the competitors. Are they paying a lot more for the same value? Are they paying the same price but getting a lot less value? This is something that you really need to start understanding and getting clear about so that you can generate your own value perception. And it's also worth thinking about, how are they paying at the moment? I mean, typically with many online places, you'll be able to pay by credit card, but do you want to offer Bitcoins? Do you want to offer Stripe? Is PayPal important to your customer base? Are you looking at lots of cross-border transactions, in which case Payoneer might be useful? Do they need to pay cash on delivery, which is very common across Southeast Asia? All these have an impact from sort of cultural basis and your customer segments. And certainly in my experience, we found one company that I was running, we found that we really hated cash collection. It was an absolute pain. It slowed everything down. The logistics were a nightmare. The fraud risk was a nightmare of collecting cash. But at the same time, 30% of our customers would not buy from us unless they could pay cash. So that was pretty critical. And so that's the next question that you need to answer. How will customers pay? Yeah, what do you have to do to satisfy their payment requirement? If you've got more than one segment and you're selling to more than one group of people, let's have a look at all the different revenue streams that you've got. So if you've got a business, and part of it is a business to consumer, a B2C play, part of it is a business to business play, how much revenue are you getting from each? If it's about equal, that's one thing. You then start having a look at, okay, what is the different profitability of these revenue streams? Alternatively, if you've got it very skewed in one direction or other, so 95% of your revenues or sales come from one consumer segment, you then have to ask yourself, why am I putting in the effort into this particular segment where I get very low amount of sales in? Is it because it's a footprint, so that at a later point I want to expand that bridgehead and branch out, so I'm doing it to gain experience, so I'm doing it for strategic reasons? Is it something that I started off a long time ago and I'm still doing because I haven't thought about it, and it's just consuming resources that could be better spent increasing the sales for your more successful segments? Revenue streams are basically all the sales that the company makes, and each of your segments should be generating a revenue stream. Each of your value propositions, again, is contributing to that revenue stream. Now, you need to be clear about this. Not every segment is to generate cash or revenue. Yeah? Many cases, especially online, you will find that particular segments get the value or the service for free. There are many types of freemium software out there where one segment consumes a basic offering for free, whereas other segments sort of pay for an enhanced offering and then effectively cross-subsidize the rest of the segment. In Google, we get the search functionality, we get a lot of the docs, the Gmail for free, because that then allows advertisers, Google to reach out to advertisers with a stronger value proposition, and it's the advertisers who are paying for the normal users to get everything for free. However, you need to make sure that these revenue streams balance out. What is the cost of providing all the free search or the free email for consumers, and is that matched, more than matched, by the revenue that's coming in from other segments? There are generally two types of revenue that you need to look at. The first type is transaction revenue, and this is familiar to everybody from the time that they're 5 or 6 years old and headed down to the sweet shop with their $1 or £1 and gave the money and got some sweets back. Yeah, that is transaction revenue. So I buy this from you, I give you some cash, and we've got a simple exchange going on there. And that has been very much the traditional retail approach for many years, and in fact is predominant still on the internet. The second approach is the subscription model. That is when you're paying on a regular basis for a product or service. So a few examples of subscription services. I worked with one company, and they sell bras for oversized women, and they do it on a subscription box basis. So you pay, I think it's $50 or $60 a month, and then every 3 months you get a box full of new bras. Another example is I got an SMS from my bank this morning telling me that The Economist had automatically charged me 150 ringgit, and therefore I'd be getting the next 3 months of The Economist delivered to my iPad every Friday morning. So these are recurring revenues that keep on happening on a regular basis. Another example would be a bank lending you money for a mortgage. They lend you the mortgage money, you then pay them back with a regular cash flow over time. So there are lots of different ways of generating revenue. The most obvious one is asset sales, where you sell something, a physical product most of the time. This could be a car, it could be a bulldozer, it could be a stick of bubble gum, it could be a book, and we don't necessarily have to be physical assets. It could be a CD, it could be music. We've got a model there. Music has changed quite a lot, so it's not always an asset sale nowadays. So that is the one that most people are familiar with. And then you can have models where you're buying the usage rights. One of the most interesting ones is, say, Monsanto, who sell the usage rights to farmers of potato seeds for a single generation. And that basically means that they get the seeds, they grow the potatoes, and then if they got any seeds from those potatoes, they're not allowed to actually use those. Other examples would be if you're renting a car or a jet engine from somebody else, and you're getting the right to use it for a particular period of time. Then there are subscription fees. A lot of the time you're subscribing to software as a service. Salesforce.com is a great example of this. Microsoft and Zoho both offer office suites where you subscribe on a monthly basis, magazines and newspapers, and as I said earlier, bras, razor blades, many things can now be bought on a subscription basis. And then you're looking at also lending or leasing or renting. So if you're leasing or renting a property or your hire purchase, so that somebody is lending you an asset and then you'll pay a regular monthly fee to use that asset, and that's different to the subscription or the usage rights, because the asset control of the asset still retains with the vendor until you've paid it off, or in some cases they can take it back at any time depending on the contract terms. You don't end up with that ownership of it. Then you can have licenses that can be sold. So a great example for this is, say, Ferrari or Harley Davidson, and they sell licenses to other companies to produce hats or watches or lighters with Ferrari on them. And Ferrari collects, say, $100,000 for the right to produce, for letting somebody produce 2 million Ferrari branded hats. And there's also, this is very popular in the media, where something like the Great British Bake Off, the BBC then licenses the format to media companies in other countries to then produce their own localized versions of it. So there is a great opportunity in many cases for licensing. There's also brokerage, which is the arbitrage, the ability to make a small profit between buyer and seller. Probably the most common sort of brokerage is a company like Visa or MasterCard, who charge the retailer for delivering money to them, and then the bank for collecting money from them. They stand between your bank and the retailer and making sure that the money goes between the two of them. And for that, they charge a small fee. Banks and stockbrokers do much the same thing for foreign exchange, shares, and many other financial devices like that. And the final one is in advertising, and you can sell advertising space. Google famously makes a vast amount of money from advertising, and also many other websites do. It's worth pointing out that advertising is far less effective than it used to be, simply because with the explosion of the internet, there is so much space available for advertising, and with a massive amount of supply, demand, or the price that you can get from the demand has decreased and is decreasing year on year. So this is worth thinking about if you're thinking about, okay, I'm going to have a website and I'm going to support it through advertising. You need a lot of traffic for that. Right, so there's quite a lot to do on pricing. So the next way that next thing about that we're going to look on revenue are the pricing mechanisms that you can use to get money from customers. And broadly speaking, there are two approaches to pricing that you can take. You can either go for fixed price or dynamic pricing. This very much depends on the kind of market that you're in, the customers that you are looking at, and in some cases it will just not be a decision for you at all. You'll just go with what is common for your industry or sector. But always remember, one of the ways to be disruptive is to start changing, mixing things up and seeing what you can do differently. Yeah? If you do exactly the same as everybody else, you're not in a strong competitive position. If your business model is different, that may confer to you some competitive advantage. So looking at fixed pricing. So the most obvious approach is the list price. If you go to a supermarket, you've got set prices on all the items. Yeah, You go in, you pay the list price, bang. Very, very simple. The next approach is feature-dependent pricing, and this is probably most common when you're going out and buying a new car. So you get the basic model, and it's going to be $30,000 for the car. And if you want a sunroof, that's going to be another $1,500. If you want the better CD, that's going to be another $600. If you want this, so the more features that you want, the more you have to pay. And this can be done quite effectively in online sales as you cunningly structure the different offers that you have available to customers to maximize the amount of money that you can extract from them. The next approach is pricing differently to different target segments. So marketing, what you can do with marketing, so if you brand and market the same value proposition differently to different segments, you can get very, very different prices. So for example, I'm thinking about Hindustan Lever. They sell 500 milliliter bottles of shampoo to consumers in the big cities, and those go down well with the middle class, and they charge a fair and reasonable price. I'm not quite sure what it is, to those consumers, and they buy that. However, once you go out into the villages, nobody can afford to buy 500 millilitres of shampoo all at once. It's a very large purchase. So what they do instead is they just sell sachets, and the actual cost per sachet is 2 to 3 times the price per milliliter of the big bottles that people buy in the cities. So thus you've got a very differential pricing between two different customer segments for an otherwise identical product. And then the final approach on fixed price is the volume dependency. So if you buy one product, it will be $10. If you buy 1,000 products, it will be $4. If you buy $100,000, it will be $2 per unit. The more, and this basically, the company is passing on their economies of scale to you through that mechanism. This works best in I think manufacturing or where there's high volumes of commodities involved. You do see volume discounts in certain types of software. So, for example, for user license, one user license might be $30, but you'll get a volume discount of 10,000 licenses, because fundamentally the marginal cost of an additional license is very, very close to zero. So now if we look at dynamic pricing, so dynamic pricing was traditionally far more common because that is fundamentally what happens when we have negotiation. So if you go into a typical Middle Eastern market or much in the developing world, prices don't have the same list fixed price that you get in many Western cultures. And also, you get a lot more bargaining where the buyer and seller aren't quite sure about the value of the good that's being exchanged. This is a little bit difficult to implement online. It's informal. Certainly in the real world, in different countries, different cultures, there are a lot of rules and cultural artifacts that surround it. However, a variation of this, which is auctioning, does have a very, very big place in the modern world, and we see this in lots of different places. I mean, the most obvious one is in Google's auctions of advertising spots in Google AdWords. So if you pay the most and meet a number of other conditions, you'll then get the top spot in the advertising ranking. You also see auctions for things like houses or cars or antique furniture, and also for telecoms licenses. And one of the characteristics of auctions is where the item is difficult to price. The market may be a little bit illiquid. So a house in a particular road is sold every 2 to 3 years. So whilst you know what the general market is doing, you don't know what a particular local market is doing in that particular road. So it's a way of getting a fairer price, but it has a number of flaws as well. Another approach to market-dependent pricing is something like petrol. Petrol is very much dependent on the oil price, and the oil price fluctuates each day for hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of reasons. Every buyer and seller has a different opinion on whether they need to buy or not, whether they'll delay or not. That alters the market price. Thus, many things from petrol to chemicals to animal feed will then have a price that is either fully or partially dependent on the market, and there is only a certain amount that you can do with that. So for example, when I used to sell steel, which is a commodity, we were hugely dependent on the general economic climate because construction uses a vast amount of steel. Yeah, if the economy is down, construction is down, and therefore that will push the price of steel down. Conversely, when times are good, steel price goes up, and it's you can then raise the prices that you charge. So that is market-dependent pricing. And then the final approach to pricing is yield management, and this is basically charging different people different prices for the same product. I mean, it's classically used in the airline industry, and their problem is they've got an aircraft full of seats, and what they need to do is they need to make sure that the aircraft is full of people in those seats. If they're not full, they're leaving money behind, because the seats, once that flight's gone, they're never going to be able to sell those seats ever again. So what they do, as the flight comes closer and closer to departure, they change the pricing of the tickets to reflect the availability. And yield management can go in one of two ways in this time-dependent approach. It's like, if the flight's empty, they may discount and discount and discount, trying to get those people who were marginal about flying to book the ticket and fly with them. On the other hand, if the plane is very, very full, they can increase the price of the ticket to extract the most value from people who need to fly on that plane at the last minute. And that's quite a complicated subject to actually implement that into your pricing strategy. So when you're going out as a startup and looking at your pricing, it's generally better at this stage to take an overall approach. Look at what other people are doing in your industry and do something similar, because they will have learned a lot of lessons. If you're coming into the market with an intention to disrupt the pricing deliberately, that's a different kettle of fish. When you're establishing pricing or revenues as a startup, a lot of the time you're having to do multiple experiments to figure out what the right approach to pricing is. One customer was telling me about how he's doing it at the moment, and he said, right, well, what I'm doing is I'm giving away my product for free so that I know that people like it. That gives me my initial validation, and then I'm giving a 90% discount for the next tranche of customers, then an 80%, then a 70%, and I'm slowly building up to what my target list price is and finding out what is the price that the market demands, because he, as a small entrepreneur, doesn't have access to all the pricing data that one of the big fast-moving consumer goods giants like Unilever or Procter & Gamble has. He's got very limited amount of data, so he's having to do a number of experiments to figure that out. So in this lesson, we've gone through quite a lot about revenues, how you find them, and then several different aspects of pricing and your approaches to how you sell your value proposition to your customer. Add this now onto your onto your business model canvas. Make sure that you've got a revenue strategy for each segment, and then feel free to ask questions in the comments box below.